I want for people to have this thought that drinking should be an opt-in, active choice rather than just a cultural default behavior. I drink because they drink, because my daddy drinks, because we all drink in Texas. Oh, well, okay. Oh, okay. But, what about you? But individually, is it working for you? And is it aligned with where you want to be?
Hey, sober people and sober adjacent people. Welcome to I Have 12 Questions. I'm Amanda Patton, your host, a leading expert on nothing. However, I am in recovery and I love it so much so that I launched this podcast where we get to talk to people who are trudging the road to happy freaking destiny across all the different ways that people get there. So while this is definitely through the lens of recovery and sobriety, these stories and the themes that we'll be covering are universally human. So love, loss, grief, excitement, parenting, outside issues, purpose, God stuff, whatever. In the words of the great Ted Lasso by way of Walt Whitman, I want to be curious, not judgmental. So like I said, we'll be talking to people in recovery. We're going to be talking to experts and practitioners who help those people along their path in recovery. And we're just really excited to hear people tell their stories and to be inspired by them and to create a community of support for everybody in recovery and people who know and love people who struggle with addiction issues and whatnot. So anyways, we're so glad you're here and thanks for listening. Hey listeners, just a quick disclaimer before we get into the interview. These episodes may contain adult language and subject matter that's not appropriate for all audiences. Also, we are not doctors or psychiatrists, so what we share on these episodes is certainly not to be considered medical or psychological advice, just our own personal experiences, which we hope will be helpful to others on a similar quest. So that's it, and thanks for listening. All right. Hey, sober family and our entire listener community. Today's guest is someone that I don't know personally, but I do follow and learn from. I've listened to some of her podcast episodes. And Anna is a coach who helps other people reframe their mindset around drinking. And for 20 years, she drank daily, thinking nothing of finishing a bottle of wine in the evening. At the time, she believed alcohol was helping her cope with the stresses of everyday life, but it was actually leaving her feeling exhausted, ashamed, and unhappy. These are your words, Anna, from your website. It says, I just knew I couldn't carry on. I knew I was addicted, but I didn't know what to do about it. And I felt an enormous amount of shame. And then she was going through panic attacks and typed in, am I an alcoholic, into Google. And that's when she discovered This Naked Mind by Annie Grace, which many of us in the recovery community are familiar with. And so, she spent time trying to understand the why behind why she was drinking and was able to give up alcohol completely. And her journey inspired her to become an alcohol mindset coach. And you have launched the Big Drink Rethink to get people talking openly and honestly about alcohol. And I will put all this in the show notes so that you guys have it and can go check out her website and her podcast. But it's at thebeliefscoach.com. And her episode will be available on wherever you get your podcast and or YouTube. So having said all that, Anna Donaghey, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's so good to have you. We had some technical difficulties. I apologize for that. It's always fun.
They make us stronger. We learn. Well, we would learn. I still don't know what happened, but yeah.
Either. Something on my end, obviously, but luckily we got it resolved. Well, I want to start with an icebreaker, which is if your life had a theme song, what would it be and why?
Oh my goodness. Oh goodness me. I don't know. You put me on the spot. I would say it is something around you get knocked down, but I get up again. I can't remember the tune. I can't remember the name of the song, but the lyric is in my head. But it would be something about bouncing back, not staying down.
That's a fun song. Also,
Yeah.
you seem like you have a fun personality. I don't know you, but that's the vibe I get.
That's nice.
So can you take us back through a little bit about, what it was like when you were in your active addiction, and how long ago, when you stopped drinking, or when that kind of started for you?
Sure. So I live in the UK. We have a pretty boozy culture.
Yeah.
I slipped into drinking when I was in my mid-teens. It was just never really a conscious decision. It was just something that happened, and I drank, through my teenage years, through my university years, and when I started work. I would say over the course really of my late 20s, my 30s, and my 40s, I lost control of my drinking, which scared me to death. It actually ramped up at a time in life when I should have probably been getting a bit more responsible when I had my children. That was a real flashpoint for me, having children. And my drinking increased and I lost control of it. I was just about managing to keep up, my appearances and go through the motions of life. I was parenting, but drinking dominated my life, to be honest. My daily evening drinks, my nightly, middle of the night panic attacks, manic episodes, as I call them now, my habitual hangovers, and then, the daily exhaustion. They're always waking up on the back foot, feeling you've been somewhat steamrollered. So I was just in this cycle of spin and repeat, which I think a lot of listeners would probably be able to, associate with. It was consuming a huge amount of my time. And, it was definitely control. I had lost control and I was spanking a great deal of my life away on alcohol. You said, what did it feel like? I was addicted. I was exhausted. I was stuck. I was terrified. Um, and, that went on for many years. I knew drinking was a problem way before I confronted it. I had a lot of shame around it. And it just meant that I stayed stuck, and I took my drinking into sort of secret behaviors. I thought, if the world's going to judge me, or if I thought the world was going to judge me, then I would flip and do it elsewhere.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a common thing, isn't it? I decided to probably drink a little bit secretively and lie about my drinking to those who asked me about it. I I sometimes talk about my period of addiction like feeling I was kind of stuck in a dark room. All the lights had gone out and I couldn't find the door. That's the analogy that I keep coming back to, really. Or even if I knew that vaguely there was a door there, I didn't really know how to open, and I was very scared about what was on the other side. I just remained very, very stuck, unable to kind of bring myself to ask for help, and also utterly unable to change my own behavior by myself.
Yeah, that's a great summary of what it feels like. And I know that my listeners, and I'm sure you have an eclectic mix of listeners as well for your show. But a lot of people, the reason I started this podcast is because I got sober almost 11 years ago in 12-step programs. And so it was all that I knew, and I was desperate, and I was very stuck. And I love that feeling of being in a dark room. That's what it felt like. I didn't know how to get out of what I was doing, but I didn't know what else I was going to do if I didn't do that. And I didn't want to give up drinking because it was sort of my coping thing, even though it was causing more problems than it was solving at that point. But over the years in recovery in 12-step rooms, I just noticed that I was getting a little dogmatic, almost like people do in church, where somehow you think that's the only way. And that's never, right? Nothing's ever the only way. Like, there's so many ways, and depending on who you are and what works for you. And then being judgy about other people who do it differently. And like, I don't want to be like that. And so I started this podcast so I could start talking to people who've gotten sober and stayed sober, like all kinds of ways, not just because 12-step programs a lot of times lean on higher powers and whatnot. And I'm agnostic and I have a hard time with all that stuff. So I faked for a long time so I could get sober. But it's just so weird to me that no matter, I know people who quit drinking by joining a drum circle, or all this stuff. But like we all have this in common is that feeling at the end where you just feel so trapped and you
100%.
Don't ask for help and you don't even know. And I didn't want to ask for help because I knew somebody was going to tell me I had to stop drinking. And I was terrified.
But this is the thing because, we're all different and, alcohol, it's addictive to human beings. So it has a common effect on people. It is easy to become addicted to alcohol, but our way out of it and our way through it is going to be different. Different authorities are going to speak to different people. We will have different perceptions of what life is going to be like. We'll have, a different acceptance or tolerance towards either following rules or having to carve your own path or, and in this day and age, it is wonderful that there are lots of different colors and shapes and sizes of help because we all need different things. And it's about finding what speaks to you. And we shouldn't be, trying to do that bettering game of like, well, I'm with AA, well, I'm with this negative, well, I'm with this. It's like, it's not a competition, is it? It's about providing as many different routes as is needed for people to get through that sort of hideous period in their life, and hallelujah that there are so many more routes out there now. I stayed very, very stuck with my common perception that it was AA or no way. And I have not a bad word to say about AA because, they have helped millions and millions of people, but they just weren't personally for me. And that's just a very personal thing. And if you don't think there are other options out there, then you stay stuck. So that, that lack of options can keep you stuck as much as the drinking can keep you stuck. So we just need lots of avenues. We need lots of routes. So I congratulate you for your perspective on the podcast because I think it's important.
Thank you. Thank you. And people like Annie Grace, and there's a lot of voices now out there, where it's this wide open lane. But back in the day, the only option I knew of was AA. So that's where I went because I was desperate. I was like, I'll do anything. I'll go anywhere. I'll do what anyone tells me to do. And I did. And it got me sober. It literally saved my life. So I would never disparage AA or any 12-step program in any way because the fellowship and women in those rooms literally saved my ass. But there were parts of it that I eventually outgrew. And now I go to secular AA. Like I can still be part of those communities that aren't so, religious or whatever. And, but the point is, I think the disease of alcoholism, some people don't view it that way. I think I do. I guess, I don't know. I'm still confused on the science behind that. But, some people can't drink a little bit. Some people can. And that's another thing, right? It's all or nothing for someone like me because I know that, but I was desperate and I would have done anything. But I want to be able to be my actual self. I don't want to pretend to be someone else or pretend to believe something that other people believe so I can fit in. And in the beginning, I think I didn't have enough love and respect for myself to even know that. And then over time, I was like, I don't really believe that. Not that that's make you a bad person. True. Yeah.
You got to think about your need state back then. I mean, you're ahead of me. You're 11 years sober, right? There weren't as many options. There weren't as many options available, and you took the one that was apparent to you at that time, and it worked. Thank God it worked.
God. Yes.
11 years later on, if you're finding nuances in that and, adapting it or your beliefs have changed, your attitude towards the whole thing has changed, then so be it. We all evolve and we're supposed to.
Yeah.
We're supposed
Yeah.
to. So, you know, at the time you definitely, you found what was there and you used it, and thank God it helped you. Now
Yes.
you do, you know, do what you want.
Right? Right? No, and I think another thing that came up for me is that there were all these women that needed help. And so I'm trying to sponsor all of these women, but a lot of them were younger, or they were of a different generation, or they were secular. And so what I had been taught was not going to resonate. And so I'm like, I still want to help you. I don't care if you believe what I believe. I don't care, you know. And that was the big impetus for me of like, I've got to find other ways to be there for people and to walk them through this process, whatever that looks like for them. Not just my way, because that's how I learned. And it took a lot of humility, because there's a lot of fear mongering sometimes in some of those groups, where if you don't do it this way, you're going to die, you're going to relapse. It's almost like church. Like, if you don't do this and you're not perfect, you do it like we do it, then you're going to burn in hell. It kind of, there are some groups that make you feel that way. And like, I don't want to, that's not healthy for me. So yeah, anyways. Okay. So were you what you would consider functional? And you just alluded to it earlier, that you were parenting, you were keeping up appearances and, you know, but given your demanding career and you're raising kids and all this kind of stuff, you know, do you think you were functional? And, you know, why are we convinced that it helps us to cope with life? What is it about that whole snap?
Well, you know, I was totally functioning, you know, at the point in time. So 4 years ago, just coming up to 4 years ago, it was New Year 2020 when I stopped drinking. And at that point, I was the strategy director of an advertising agency. I sat on the board. Yeah, I ran a team of people. We helped big brands communicate big campaigns on, you know, advertising and TV. We were, we're working at a high level, and it was strange, because for all intents and purposes, that's what I looked like I was. You know, a successful strategist. In reality, I was just about managing to keep up appearances and go through the motions. I felt, you know, as alcohol has its ability to do, it made me feel like an absolute imposter. It made me feel like I was going to be found out every damn minute, you know. But I was hanging on in there. Now, you know, you asked me a really interesting question there about, you know, why are we convinced that it helps us cope? We have a lot of stuff we have to cope with, don't we? We're sort of working away at a level like that, or in any job, to be honest, and parenting and caring for our parents and doing all those sorts of things these days. I think we end up giving alcohol jobs to do. That's the way I describe it to people, you know.
Yeah.
At various times in life and to varying degrees throughout life, we typically ask it to help us feel more of the good stuff. So more relaxed, you know, more confident, more stimulated, more fun, more interesting, more connected, more of the good stuff, and less of the bad stuff, like less bored, less tired, less overwhelmed. And that's, you know, that's very much behind the reasons why I know now that my drinking ramped up when I was in my 30s and on maternity leave, because, you know, parenting brings with it this kind of whole tsunami of moments and emotions like that, when you want to feel less this and more that, and, you know, promotions and career changes and bereavements and divorces and redundancies, all that sort of stuff. We get hit with these emotions at various times through life, and we give alcohol the job of helping us cope with them. You know, and when we use alcohol to manage our emotions on a daily basis, it will do its thing. You know, if we are calling on it, alcohol, please do this job for me, help me feel relaxed.
Yeah.
And we feel stressed on a daily basis, we therefore want alcohol on a daily basis to help relax us. It is very easy to become addicted. I always say, you know, if we drink enough of it in the wrong circumstances, then it's very, very easy to fall into a pattern whereby we're using it to cope. That's certainly what I was doing. I'm very, very aware of that now.
Yeah.
Functioning, looking like I was coping, kind of like a swan on the surface, legs going bonkers underneath the surface.
Yeah.
Just trying to look graceful, but in all honesty, just trying to look like I was something staying afloat. But yeah, it's but I think there are a lot of people out there who will describe themselves as functioning,
Yeah.
and that's why they sort of fly underneath that radar as well.
It's so, I love how you explained it because it's so gradual, and it reminds me of that frog in a boiling pot of water or whatever. It's like I didn't realize I had a problem until it was kind of too late. It kind of had its claws in me. I was now physiologically, physically, emotionally addicted. It's how I got relief. It's how I had fun. It's how, like you said, I gave it a lot of jobs. It had a lot of work to do, and I needed it every day. But I wasn't always falling down drunk or causing problems. And so to me, it didn't really look like it. But I talk about this all the time with people. People who have a normal relationship with alcohol don't have these conversations with themselves. They're not wondering, is this a problem? Because I knew, like you said, I knew long before I did anything about it, because I felt awful all the time. And I felt like I was leading two lives and working and going to PTA meetings and looking like I had my shit together, and then knowing that without all these chemicals, I could barely get through my day. Because for me, it was alcohol and Xanax and Adderall and other things on weekends. And it became a whole science project of how can I be productive and not have to feel my feelings, right? And we're not designed for that. But something that I've heard in the rooms that I love is that, not to beat ourselves up over it either. For whatever reason, we needed that at the time to survive. And so I don't even know that I would take it back. It's what I had at the time. It's what got me through. And
I couldn't agree with that more.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree with that more. I think one of the things that really spoke to me when I started, looking at my options and thinking, for about the 50 millionth time, I'm serious. I'm serious this time. I can't go on like this.
Yeah.
No, I'm really serious this time. Do you know what I mean? So when I started to sort of research my options, one of the things that really spoke to me, it was in this Naked Mind. It was in the book. It was this idea that we were just doing the best we could with the tools that we've got. Now, I didn't have better tools. And nobody had given me better tools. That's not an issue, by the way. That's not blame for anyone else. It's not a dig at my parents or anything like that at all. I just didn't have better tools. And then there's this thing, isn't there, alcohol? And it says, I'm going to make you feel more relaxed, and I'm going to make you fit in, and I'm going to make you feel more socially confident, and I'm going to make you care less if you're not any of those things. And that was it. It was just like my multi-tool. It was there for all jobs.
Yeah.
Now, I wish I'd have had a better toolbox. I've spent a lot of time over the last 4 years, putting better tools in my toolbox, but my intentions were never bad.
Right.
They were never, ever bad. I was just doing the best with the tools that I had. I just had crap tools.
Yeah.
Right.
It's interesting too, though, because alcohol is such a part of our social fabric. You talk about living in a boozy culture. I'm in Texas. Like, people drink their ass off here. I live by the lake. Like, it's just like drink in your hand, like flip flops and just island time and whatever. And, but also you worked in advertising, and advertising is one of the biggest culprits in terms of like normalizing and also making everything sexy with alcohol, right? Like, that's how you elevate any experience, right? Is that all the commercials and all the imagery that we see. But also, I know advertising people, and they party. Like, every advertising person I know, like that's a very celebratory culture. You're always taking clients out. There's a lot of drinking. So even if you did have a problem, it may not look like a problem because you're in that environment.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's it's a sort of work hard, play hard environment. It's quite a young person's environment as well. It's a creative environment. There's lots of myths spun around the fact that, you have a few drinks, have a brainstorm, let's get creative and all that sort of stuff. It's pretty much, I worked in 4 different advertising agencies in London, and each of them had their own bar. You didn't even have to leave the building to go and because that was the thing. They thought, well, if you leave the building, you're going to be gone. You're going to be on the boozer all day. So just stay in the building and booze. So that was, I'm sure that was a sort of rationale behind having the bar. But this was fun. This was exciting, and it meant that it was a very booze soaked industry. We spent a lot of time taking clients out. We spent a lot of time either celebrating pitch wins or commiserating pitch losses or working late into the evening and who's getting the beers in, awards dinners, airport lounges, I pretty much anywhere I wanted a drink, I would have been able to point it to everyone else around me doing the same thing. So I reckon that before I quit, I was in about a 20-year period. 10 years, I would have had my head in the sand. I knew I had a problem and I was in denial. Mm-hmm. The 10 years before that, my behavior around drinking was leading to a problem, but I didn't see the storm clouds gathering,
Right.
I didn't even know that what I was doing was risky. Well, if it was, everyone else is doing it too. So that mitigates the risk, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's weird. It's very weird. It's a very stealthy thing, I think.
Yeah.
And it works on stealth and deceit. You believe it's doing these jobs for you. It's not. In many cases, it's doing exactly the opposite, but you are hooked in by that stage and become increasingly capable of getting yourself out of, the hole that you're sort of slipping into.
I've heard, I know a lot of people who are artists and musicians and similar in those environments where eventually you're just surrounded by it and it doesn't really seem abnormal anymore. And, and then you wake up one day and you're like, what the hell is going on? Right. But it's so gradual and so normalized. And the other thing, I always liken going back to drinking for me would be like going back to an abusive relationship. Like if you take somebody back after they did something toxic, they're usually pretty well behaved for a few months or, a few weeks or whatever. Then eventually that stuff starts creeping back in. And I would relapse or go back to drinking and it would be great for a few weeks or a few months. I was like, okay, I finally cracked the code. I can just do it every once in a while. I don't feel like I need it, but I can enjoy it when I want to. And then eventually it just would get its tentacles all wrapped around me again. And, there were parts of me that actually missed it. Even the darkness of it, there was parts of me that missed it. And I don't, just like an ex-husband that was really, really bad for me and I was bad for him. But that doesn't mean that I don't sometimes miss that situation. But intellectually knowing how bad it is. So it's kind of like, it took me a long time. And I think that's where a lot of that self-respect, I had to figure out how to care enough about myself to not put myself in that position. And to also know that for the highs that I was going to get, I needed to know that the lows were going to come too. Cause for a long time, the drinking was really fun and it was a lot of highs. And then eventually it was more lows than highs. It's a weird psychological game though, that you play with yourself. It's like I would deceive myself about my relationship with alcohol over and over again.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think one of the things that really appealed to me about this Naked Mind, and it's very, very much a part of the coaching that I help people with now, is you've got to look at your beliefs. You've got to. It's not just about your beliefs in alcohol. The fact that we believe that it can help us relax and build our confidence, and it's the glue that makes the world go round. And we believe that we're not going to have any fun anymore if we don't drink it. We believe we're not going to belong. We believe this. We believe that. We also have to look at the beliefs we have around ourselves.
Right.
Right. in many cases, and I'm certainly not saying every case, but almost invariably, behind a sort of a drinking problem are, some feelings and thoughts of inadequacy, that you are not enough, or that you're not smart enough, or you're not whatever you want to put into that sentence. You're not X enough, and drinking somehow fills that gap. Gives you that missing part of the personality or whatever. Sometimes it can just boil down to the fact that we have a low opinion of ourselves.
Yeah.
And when we have a low opinion of ourselves and we have low self-esteem, we don't value ourselves. And if we don't value ourselves, we treat ourselves like shit.
Yeah.
We don't put those boundaries up. We don't protect ourselves in the same way as you can easily slip into, a sort of a coercive and difficult relationship.
Yeah.
That's what happens. That's what happens physically, and that's what can happen, metaphorically as well with alcohol. So it's really important to understand all the reasons why you drink, whether they're just, beliefs that we have that it can do a certain job as a substance, but also the beliefs that you have about yourself, that believe, that you're not enough without it.
And that's why, to me, therapy and like having a support group and a community of people, a coach, support, right? And that is why that is so important, because like you said, it can make you feel like you have that thing that you think you're missing, or you don't care anymore that you don't have it, right? Whatever it is, it's some kind of relief. It's temporary relief from that. And then when you get into therapy and you start doing step work and you talk about this and that, and you get a coach who talks you through stuff. And, for me, it all went back to my childhood. And I blame my parents for a lot of things. And it wasn't their fault, because they too were working with the tools they had. They were loving me.
The best of the tools they had, yeah.
The way they were loved. And there was a lot of dysfunction there. And guess what? I carried that dysfunction into my relationship with my own daughter. So congratulations, right? Like the cycle continues. But the awareness, like you're saying, of like, why do I even feel like that? And it was never because of me, and it wasn't because my parents didn't love me enough or that I wasn't good enough or whatever. It was, they had their own stuff going on. And that made me feel unloved, but that's not what it was at all, right? And I had my own stuff going on, and at times my daughter felt like I was not there for her because of that. And I never wanted to make her feel that way. I just couldn't deal with my own stuff, much less show up for her in the way she needed sometimes. So, but it took a shitload of work and like a decade of therapy to like understand this stuff, and to not be angry anymore and not blame people.
I think I think you mentioned it right at the gate there. You mentioned this idea of kind of community, and sometimes very small communities. It could just be you and a therapist, or a small group.
Somebody.
Somebody, because I mean, let's face it, the whole insidious nature of addiction works on the fact that you believe it's a you problem. That it's you, it's you're flawed, you're terrible, you're weak. You do all of this stuff, even knowing that it's, you're selfish and all this sort of stuff.
Right.
But as soon as you sort of get yourself into an environment where you are amongst other people, two things happen. First of all, you share, and just sharing and offloading is a massive release of shame and bad feeling about yourself anyway. But also you realize that there's a real human connection there, a common humanity, that a lot of other people feel the same way as you. And I always I love Brené Brown. All right, who doesn't? Brené, but Brené, she makes this really brilliant point that shame thrives on secrecy. It cannot survive in the light. And in a community, when you share, the shame can just fall away. It can literally just dissolve. It shrivels up when you put it out into the light, and you put it out into a like-minded group of people, that you are suffering in this way, and they can all go, me too. Me too. And that's where it can all start. Once you've kind of managed to offload that shame, then you can create a space for the investigation, for the healing, for the sort of self-analysis. But that's why that community is so important in the first instance. And then oodles of self-compassion.
Yeah.
Oodles and oodles of self-compassion, because we are all products of our upbringing. We've been conditioned in certain ways. Our beliefs have come from a myriad of different places.
Yeah.
But if they've all kind of construed to create a need for us to feel like we need drinking again, it's no one's individual fault. It's just the way we have found ourselves to be, and we've reached for the nearest tool.
Right.
That's it for me. It's
true.
Yeah.
It's so true. I've heard in the rooms, like, we're not bad people trying to get good, we're sick people trying to get well, or like, I just needed to replace some behavior. So instead of going to a bar after work or going to get beer before I went home, I would just go to a meeting instead. I needed to just replace, just real simple for a while, until I could just start to redesign neural pathways and break some habits and stuff like that. Because a lot of things I did out of reflex. And I talked to a lot of people. They just drank after work because that's what you do. They didn't even necessarily want or need a drink. It just became part of the thing.
Yeah.
And Brene Brown, I think she also talks about, like, the opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, it's connection, or something like that. Yeah. It's like that, like you were talking about, shame is dispelled when it's exposed to the light. And we've talked a lot about, meaning sharing it with someone else. And we talk a lot in the rooms about how your brain one side of your brain manufactures the bullshit and the other side buys it. So if I'm just hanging out with myself all the time, I'm never going to get out of that room, that dark room that I can't find the door, because I'm trying to figure it out with my own stuff. But when I start talking to other people and they start sharing how they found their way out, for some reason, it's like, oh, and then you can try things on. Well, that's not going to work for me, but that could work. And I want to try this and I want to try that. And, but to your point, you feel so bad in that shame cycle of like, why do I keep doing this to myself? And then you meet other people who are in the same boat. And, for whatever reason, it just, you have compassion for other people, and it makes it easier to have compassion for yourself after a while.
Absolutely. I mean, we talk to ourselves in ways that we would never talk to other people, right? So if a friend came to you and said, I'm drinking too much, I'm, not delivering on my own promises, I'm failing on my commitments to other people, I'm drunk all the time, I'm drinking at 10 o'clock in the morning, you would not, in your wildest dreams, sit there and go, "Oh, you're a loser."
Yeah.
What's wrong? What's wrong? You're flawed, you're rubbish, you're crap, you're a hideous mother, you're blah, 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 blah. You would put your arms around them and you would say to them, it is going to be all right.
Yeah.
And we're going to find a way through this.
Yeah.
And this isn't a permanent thing. This can be fixed. You are not broken.
Right. Yes.
This is what you would say to a friend, but we, to ourselves, talk in the most hideous of ways. We're brutal. And then obviously as we, because we allow this conversation to go on in our head, it's self-fulfilling, because we are what we say to ourselves. This becomes true. We believe it. We say it enough times, we believe it. And then you renege on your promises to yourself enough times, you're then proving your point to yourself. And it's just a hideous, hideous spiral. But put yourself into a room of other people, or a community, an online room of other people, where your whole sense of being in that room is to buoy them up and to offer encouragement and motivation, then you are in a different space,
right?
Because then you've got to start practicing what you preach,
right?
So it's a very powerful thing, the community thing. It really is.
I love too the fact that there are coaches now, because not everyone is going to feel comfortable walking into a room of strangers and talking about their personal stuff. And so, if that's not what you want to do or you're not ready for that, maybe you get a coach and start talking through some of that stuff. And then eventually, maybe you would have that comfort level to go join a group or some online forum or whatever. And a lot of people got sober during COVID because of that, because they didn't have to walk into a room or an AA clubhouse somewhere. They could anonymously join online and not have their camera on. And a lot of people, for the first time ever, were willing to put themselves out there like that because it wasn't so. That's a weird thing to just walk in and tell all your darkest secrets to a bunch of strangers. I look back and I'm like, what the fuck was I thinking? That's so crazy.
I know.
But it worked. I mean, I was desperate, right? Like I would have done anything to get out of that cycle that I was in.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't surprise you though that, therefore that the majority of people who I coach have come to me because they want to do it in a one-to-one environment. They don't want to walk into a room. They don't want to sort of spill the beans and their inner secrets in front of other people.
Yeah.
There's definitely that dynamic at play. I think coaching is also, it is a different dynamic. It's a hand-holding dynamic.
Yeah.
It's not a, you talk about 12 set steps and you must not drink anymore and, labels and stuff. That's not what coaching can be about. Coaching is about, we are where we are.
Yeah.
And there are hurdles that have to be removed. We need to paint a picture of where you want to get to. And we have to work out what hurdles are in the way and how we're going to navigate them. And I'm going to be standing on the sidelines here, cheering my head off, and motivating you and encouraging you, and giving you tools and tactics and strategies and all sorts of my own personal experience, advice born of that, in order to get you from where you are now to where you want to be. And I am your coach for the duration, and it's a very lovely relationship to have, the relationship between a coach and a coachee, particularly a coach who's been there,
Yes.
In that dark room, and has, walked the walk and talked the talk, as it were. So it's a different dynamic. But as we opened up this conversation by saying, it's just another flavor of help.
Yeah.
For sure.
I love that. And it's one-on-one, it's personal, it's intimate, and even in the rooms, there are certain things I wouldn't share in a co-ed meeting. And I had to start going to women's meetings because we talk about rape and we talk about pregnancy and we talk about hormones and we talk about things and so even that kind of stuff. And then if you're a private person, but I think from a coaching perspective too, of, because you yourself had the issue, you've got credibility, which is why 12-step stuff can work too, because typically you have doctors, family members, friends, church people, work people telling you you're a piece of shit. Get it together. What is wrong with you? Especially when you're an accomplished, successful, educated person out in the world and they look at you and they're like, why can't you get a handle on this drinking thing? And it's what kept me out there drinking for so long, because I was convinced that I could figure it out, because I had never met an obstacle that I couldn't overcome.
Right.
And so I was like, I will keep fighting until I figure this out. And it almost killed me, I mean, but I got a lot of judgment. And I think that's why when I started talking to other people who had literally been in my shoes, for the first time ever in my life, I did not feel judged. I felt like these were my people and they understood, and we didn't judge each other because we've all been there.
So there are people who will say to me, I want to do one-to-one coaching, and that's it. This is almost, they're not even telling their wives or their husbands that they're doing it or whatever. But then there are other people who I'll talk to in my first sort of meeting with them, and I will say to them, I think that small group coaching, which I also do, I think small group coaching is a dynamic you should consider, because I can see in somebody a thing that they think they want the privacy, or they just don't want a big group, but actually the support of some like-minded individuals, the people who can, be in that WhatsApp group away from the coaching sessions and, sharing those little daily affirmations and motivations is absolutely what they need. They just don't know it yet. So,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. What has been, would you say, and there's probably a long list of things that you could share, but what do you think has been the best part of this change in your life for you? Like, what's the best thing that's happened as a result of quitting drinking?
Self-acceptance. I think without a doubt, understanding that I am absolutely fine, the way I am, and that the natural me is by far the best version of me, and that I'm enough. But I think also the realization that because I've conquered the thing that, the hardest thing I've done in my life, is giving up booze, it's made me believe I can do anything. I'm just like, it was my kryptonite to Superman. It was my like nemesis. And the fact that I've been like, is, the fact that I've managed to sort of kick that one into touch has literally made me feel very, very, very strong and very capable. I think, some of the other things which lots of people will probably talk about, I share, it's a wonderful thing when you can recalibrate what pleasure is. And, when you take away that artificial stimulation and over a period of time, you begin to realize that there is a whole world of natural little pleasure and joy, that you are pretty much walking around anesthetized to. That is a wonderful thing as well. The fact that, that is on tap and that is free and it is natural and it's there for the taking if you just kind of let it in. That's fab. And I suppose the other thing which I would cite as being, a great result for me is I'm 53 and I feel the energy and the motivation and the ambition that I last felt in my late 20s.
Wow. And you look amazing, but you feel good, which is even more important, right?
I feel good. Yeah, a bit achy, but the point is that it had literally torn strips off me and dimmed my light to the point where I was just happy to be able to get up every morning and get away with the day, let alone sort of feel excited about opportunity and look 10, 15 years ahead and be motivated by what that could look like. That had gone. Had gone. So the return of energy and ambition, I'd have to say, has been amazing. Has wonderful.
I love how you say that though too, because you do wake up to all this stuff, and you're like, oh my god, like music and art and nature and animals, and just you're like the authentic when you're laughing or when you're sad, you're really feeling it. You're with it. You're there. You're all the way there, and it can be really painful, but at least you're really doing it. You're not numb.
Well, this is the thing, and the hardest thing, because I know that you asked me what the best.
Well, the next question is, what's the hardest part? So yes, go ahead.
Feeling more. It's that double-edged sword, isn't it? On the one hand, feeling more without this really blunt anesthetic of alcohol reminds you that you're a sort of sentient human being, and it's wonderful to feel the range of emotions. But then they kind of go, it's the best thing about being sober and the worst thing about being sober is that you feel those feelings. And I think the sort of somewhere along the line, and it took me a long while to realize this, but somewhere along the line when I was a drinker, I fell into this belief that we should be happy all the time. I was scared of not feeling happy. If I could find a way to not feel unhappy, to flick that switch, then I would do it. And that's how alcohol became very, very potent for me. I don't know where this belief came from. I don't know when I fell into the belief that we should be happy all the time. I still see it in the world.
I mean,
and social media and stuff like that.
Don't you think it's our culture?
Yeah,
Like,
I do. I think it's sad. I think it's,
positivity, like you're supposed to pretend all the time because you don't want to make other people feel uncomfortable or
and we
whatever.
edit our lives, don't we? We edit,
Yeah.
we show the happy takes of our life. We wouldn't, we don't put the shit takes out there. It's just,
Yeah.
and I think I don't think I didn't ever feel particularly sort of susceptible to the social media side of things, but maybe I was. But somewhere along the line, anyway, I
Yeah.
fell into this sort of belief that we should be happy all the time. Hence my efforts to always manage myself into a
Yeah.
happy place with alcohol. But we're not supposed to feel happy all the time. That's the point. We're not. We're supposed to feel. You're not supposed to just feel happy. We're supposed to feel everything.
Yeah.
And being able to manage that without alcohol is true resilience, but it's also a wonderful thing.
Yeah. But like when we ask each other, hey, how are you? Like we always just say, good, great, fine, right? We never, like, if you literally told someone how you were really doing that day, they would probably just walk away because no one's really asking how you're doing, right? They just want you to say you're good and then everyone's comfortable. And, it's
Yeah.
such bullshit. I don't know why we're fake like that. Like, but lately in my recovery, I'll say, I've been kind of struggling lately, but I'm doing all right. I'll be a little bit more honest. I'm not going to sit there and tell them everything that's going on, but I don't pretend to be happy. Brene Brown even says you cannot selectively numb certain emotions on the human spectrum. Like if you're
That's
going to
totally
agree
right.
to feel it, you're going to feel all of it. And I was terrified of pain and grief and fear
Yeah.
and sadness. I was so scared of it. And then we lost my pop 2 years ago, really young, to cancer. And it was the first, just like, it was like hospice and just watching that whole process. And it was grueling for him especially, but all of us
I'm
as
sure.
well. And it was the first thing I think I've been through that was that devastating without any way to escape. And it was weird because I actually didn't want to escape. I actually
No.
I felt like it was honoring him and our love and the difficult relationship we had as a child. We didn't have a
Yeah.
perfect relationship. And so that brought up a lot of stuff. But, anyways, my point is, I felt proud of myself to be able to show up for him and to feel my feelings and not be completely consumed. And then the cool thing was that I allowed myself to process them, and then I got to move on with my life.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of drinking to numb it. And people will drink for 10 years to numb some kind of
Oh,
loss.
yeah.
You realize it never went away. You still have to deal with it at some point.
Yeah, I think
So
it's yeah, I'm sorry. First of all, I'm sorry to hear about your
thank you.
dad, and that's it's really hard. And I think that a couple of things that you said there, honoring him by being present is lovely, because it's almost like don't escape what's going on here.
Yeah.
You've got to feel it, and you've got to be in there with him
Right.
as well. So that's the kind of the first thing. As you say, Brené Brown does she makes that comment about selectively numbing, and you can't say alcohol take away my grief but keep my joy intact,
No,
or take away my pain but give me oodles of pleasure. You can't, it just numbs everything. But
everything. Yeah.
the baseline of everything just gets reduced, and it stays that way. So if you keep drinking and you keep drinking, you're always lowering your baseline of emotion, the degree to which you feel anything. And then, of course, what you're talking about long term is just suppressing. You're suppressing your emotions. They're not going anywhere. They will come. It's like that. The analogy that I always think about is if you're holding an inflatable ball underneath the water, right? And you're in a swimming pool on holiday, you've got a silly beach ball, you're holding it underwater. It takes a bit of effort, but you can do it. That's what we do with alcohol. We try and keep our feelings submerged. But when we let go, oh my God, I mean, it literally spins out, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It kind of random, chaotic, where's it going to go, bouncing off the kind of the walls. That's what can happen when we suppress our emotions instead of processing them. They don't go anywhere. They're just waiting to create chaos. And it's, it's the processing. The processing of emotion is so important.
Wow.
I'm very lucky. I've still got a full set of parents. My husband's got a full set of parents. But about 5 years ago, when I was an absolute mess, I literally, one of the things that scared the bejesus out of me was this idea that I wasn't even coping with life, let alone was I able, resilient and prepared to cope with what was coming down the line.
Mm-hmm.
I thought to myself, you can't even cope with a hard day in the office. How are you going to cope when your mum passes away?
Yeah.
How are you going to cope when you lose your dad? You've got to get your shit together.
Wow.
Because these things are inevitable, and how you handle them, you either can be a great source of pride or you can regret it for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
It really does boil down to that. And it was one of my real kind of, you have got to sort your shit out to be able
Yeah.
to deal with things like that in the future.
Yeah.
Conversation's taken a heavy turn.
I know, but it also, it actually feels good because, to your point, the longer you feel nothing and you just feel less and less and less over time. And then when you do remove the alcohol, all of it comes back almost at once, it feels like, and it's overwhelming. And a lot of it can be dark and painful. And you've got all this work to do that's been piling up and festering for however long. But the joy comes back online too, and the ambition and the excitement and the innocence. It's almost like being a little kid. Like I just think like the moon is so cool and the stars are so cool. And like, look at that bird and, stuff that I just stopped noticing because I was just trying to get through the day. I wasn't enjoying life anymore. And I thought I was still being kind of a good mom because I was physically present. I was paying bills. But I wasn't really there. And my daughter and I have had conversations about this where she would come home from school or whatever, and she would just know by looking at me whether I'd been drinking or not. And I could sit there and listen to what she was saying, but I wasn't there. And she knew that. And that's sad. That's a sad thing to have to hear and accept. But I had told myself, well, I mean, you're here and she has everything she needs. So like, you're a good mom.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm sure. I mean, it's funny because my relationships with my husband and my two daughters are better than they've ever been.
Yes. Yeah.
And they're very, very positive. They're very honest. Yeah, I'm me. They can trust that it's me who's going to turn up. They can trust me. I'm not perfect, clearly. Am I flawed? Yes. Hell yes. But I'm consistent. I'm consistent and they can trust in that consistency, and I'm present and I'm more patient. And I'll tell you something that's really interesting as well that comes out in the kind of the motherhood thing or the parenthood thing is I trust my instinct. When I feel something is important, and by way of either giving them advice, I trust in it.
Yeah,
I trust myself now, so I trust my instincts, and I never used to do that. I never did. I thought to myself, you can't even handle your own life. Who the hell are you? To hand out or dish out advice and counsel on how someone else should be living theirs. So I doubted myself so much. So I doubted my skills in parenting, and now I don't. I'm really not the world's best parent, but I'm better than I was. A lot better than I was.
Like you said earlier, you get that confidence because you overcame something hard, but also when I show up, when I wake up, I'm clear-minded, I'm clear-eyed, clear-hearted. Like I may not be perfect, but I'm myself and I'm honest and I'm, and also when if I make a mistake or I hurt someone or I don't show up in the way that I want to show up, I have tools now to clean it up immediately. I I don't deny it. I don't not remember it because I was too drunk for whatever it was that I said. I mean, none of that stuff, right? Like, where's my car? Who is this in my bed or whatever? It's just, I just wake up with my dogs and have my coffee, and it's a very boring life. And to me, there have been moments over the past 11 years where I'm like, I get a little restless because I was used to some chaos, and a lot of that goes away. So that's an interesting thing too to deal with within yourself of like, why do I feel like I'm not having fun unless something's on fire? Right. Like,
that's really interesting.
Yeah. And that was part of my childhood. I felt like there was always chaos and fires to put out. And so that was normal to me. And when I don't have that, I almost feel like it's too quiet. Something bad's going to happen. I don't know. It's just a weird, but I know better now, right? I'm not going to go burn my life down over it like I used to. It's just, you learn so much about yourself. And in doing that, you learn about other people too, and I love it.
I think it's
my daughter, I only have the one child and she's an adult now, but, same. We've never had a better relationship, and all of the bumps in the road and all of the difficulties made our relationship stronger. And for someone like me who is just so stubborn and so convinced that I can do everything all by myself, to raise my hand and ask for help was a good example for her. And I hope it empowered her in her own life to ask for help when she needs it.
I'm sure it did. And I'm very, my daughters are 16 and 13, and I'm open with them. I'm open with them about my issues.
Yeah.
I share all the gory detail,
right.
But it's not edited, but they know that I had issues with alcohol.
Yeah.
That's how we talk about it. I talk about addiction. I talked to them about the fact that it made me very, very unhappy, that I risked blowing up everything that I really valued, including this lovely family. I talked to them about the things that I felt I was challenged over. And I do it because, we've gone from they respect it. They respect it. And I don't ever enforce my alcohol views now, thou shalt not drink, anything like that on them. They're their own people. They've got to, my story is my story. I've got to trust those gorgeous little girls to sort of make their own decisions, and I can but influence. But at the end of the day, the honesty that we have in our relationship is very, very important, for them to know that I have been very, very vulnerable, well outside my comfort zone, for a lot of the last 4 years, and asking important questions of myself, like, who am I and how do I want to show up? I think they're important things for them to know. I would hope that they, at some point in life, feel the benefit of being vulnerable and, being outside of their comfort zone. Because, in coaching circles, we'll always wang on about that's where growth happens, isn't it? That's where you really discover who you are.
Yes.
And I don't know, I don't think I'm over-egging it. When I talk to clients and I say, the stuff that you're going to learn about yourself when you go through this process will serve you in every aspect of your life.
Yes.
So, who doesn't want to know what triggers them, not just to drink, but to anger, to frustration, to resentment? Who doesn't want to know what can float their boat on a daily basis?
Right.
Or where to find joy, or how to have more authentic relationships. If you're a manager at work, knowing what triggers other people will be a super important management skill.
Right.
Being able to listen and, admit when you're not feeling great. All of these things are just things that you'll take through into every aspect of your life, and it will make you a super, super person to be around. So it's all really good. You kind of call it personal growth, but it spins off and has ripple effects on everybody else as well.
Yeah. And you find out that a lot of the reason, I can only speak for myself, but a lot of the reason I drank to numb is because I didn't know how to deal with some life stuff. And so I didn't know how to deal with feeling uncomfortable or triggered or this or that. And I didn't know how to deal with personalities, people that I didn't understand. And so I just didn't deal with it. And, and so when you remove that tool, that Swiss Army knife, of alcohol that I put on everything that I didn't feel like dealing with, I saw where I hate to even call it shortcomings, but I knew I needed to work on that stuff. I needed to figure that out. And a lot of you're answering so many questions just in our conversation about like the coaching and whatnot. But that was one of my questions is like, when you're coaching clients, what can they expect when they work with you? And I assumed it was because I've heard your podcast, I've heard several of the episodes, and it's, tools and whatnot, but you are exploring this inner landscape, right? Because that's what drinking was a symptom. It's not the problem. It's not the thing, right? And so, what does the client expect when they're working with you? What does that look like?
So so there's two very different things. If you're listening to the podcast, you're getting one sort of side of things. The coaching is deep. Okay, so the coaching I help clients either in those small groups or one-to-one really dig in and identify and understand their beliefs, values, and emotions, both around themselves and also around alcohol, the jobs they give it to do, and why they believe that they are not enough, why they believe they need it. So the role that it plays in their life, and also, really importantly, the role that they want it to play. I always talk about, at the point when people are talking to me, they know that alcohol is playing too big a role. But some of them will always say, "Can I moderate?" I'm like, I don't know. Let's find out what triggers you. Let's find out what jobs you're giving it to do. Let's never say never, but let's put away or put aside almost the outcome and just start trying to learn. Let's learn about your relationship with alcohol. And then the future will unfold in itself almost. It'll be revealed to you as to whether it can play a role in your life or not. Invariably, clients end up giving it up. Spoiler alert. But anyway, so we dig into all that. We do all that work. We also look at the science of alcohol because that's the intellectual side of it. How does it work? Why does it make you want to drink more? We look at the fears that they have around not drinking because that's massive. I've been drinking for 35 years. I don't know who I am if I'm not drinking. All my relationships are formed on drinking. My work life is formed on drinking. What fears are keeping them stuck as much as anything else? And we build a bigger toolbox.
Right.
We work out that alcohol is not serving you. All the things you think it's doing, it invariably is doing almost the polar opposite. So, what if you're not going to use it for self-confidence, how do you build self-confidence? If you're not going to use it to relax, what else are we going to replace it with?
Right.
How else are you going to find? So that's the kind of thing we do in the coaching for sure. And we have fun too. I know it sounds like a really heavy lift, but it's not, it's, I try and bring a sort of a levity to the whole thing, a sort of a lightness. It's an amazing experience. And the podcast is there because not everybody can do coaching.
Right.
And in a way, I try with the podcast to catch people wherever they are on their journey. It's called the Big Drink Rethink, and it is literally to say we need to rethink this kind of automatic drinking behavior we have. We just need to be more mindful. You need to work out whether you're drinking in a way that makes you happy or whether you're drinking in a way that could be leading to bigger problems. And it's an exploration of how would you know that? And if you find that, what do you do about it? And, all the influences and peer pressure and stuff that we're under. But what do you understand your relationship with alcohol is really what the podcast is saying. Because I've got this little mantra thing that I always say, which is obviously, there are those of us in life who become addicted to alcohol, but there are millions more who are just uncomfortable in their relationship with it.
Yeah.
The lady who only drinks 2 glasses of wine a night or 1 glass of wine a night, but oh my God, she has to have it. Do you know what I mean? It's a
Right.
sort of, why does it have that hold on me? So the podcast is there to sort of shine a light on possibly a broader spectrum of drinking types. And ultimately, it kind of says, when we get to the point of addiction, we're obviously very often in this place where we're sort of saying, is my drinking bad enough that I have to give up?
Yeah.
And what the podcast tries to do is turn the question around and say, is your life good enough?
Right.
Because if it's not, and drinking is in any way, shape, or form impacting negatively on you, then just think about it.
Yeah. It's so good. It's so good. It's such a gentle, and I love all your stuff and the writing and what you're covering and what you're talking about. And because of the curiosity, there's just curiosity. Like, who cares about the outcome? We're not talking about that right now. Let's just learn some stuff. Let's just see what's going on. And you shouldn't have to hit rock bottom. You shouldn't have to crash your car or go to prison or whatever before. And back in the day, that's almost like that's what it was. And I guess I was lucky in that way where I had some major issues with, going to treatment and with legal stuff. And it was bad enough to where it was an emergency for me. Right. And if I had been able to get away with it longer without having those emergencies, I don't know if I would have stopped. And so I know a lot of people in my life who were in that weird purgatory with alcohol where it's not helping or making them happy, but it's not causing enough problem to stop. So what you're saying is your life good enough? Like, are you happy? Is it doing what you want it to do? Right?
Yeah. So are you where you wanted to be? Are you living the life that you thought you could live? Are you doing the things that you wanted to do? Are you aligned to the values that you hold true? Or if not, just have a think about, the big rethink. Have a think about whether alcohol is a contributory factor to that. Is it dimming your light? Is it taking away your ambition? Has it made you feel like an imposter? Has it therefore meant you're not pushing yourself forward at work? Are your friendship groups not as rich as they could be because they all evolve around sitting at the bar? What part of your life is suboptimal?
Right.
And is alcohol impacting on it? Your health, your fitness, your finances, whatever it might be. And it's just it is about curiosity, and it is about exploration, and it is about eyes wide open. I want for people to have this thought that drinking should be an opt-in active choice rather than just a cultural default behavior. I drink because they drink, because my daddy drinks, because we all drink in Texas.
Yeah.
Oh, well, okay. Oh, okay. But, what about you? But individually, is it working for you? And is it aligned with where you want to be? And as far as the outcome is concerned, I mean, come on, one of the reasons why I might be talking to someone as a coach is because they are worried that if they go to something like AA are going to say, you've got to stop drinking. You've got to come to meetings, and you've got to do this, and you've got to do that. And they've gone straight almost to the outcome.
Right.
Whereas I will say, look, I don't know what this means yet.
Yeah.
We need to work out why you drink and why you drink fast and furious or binge or, at 10 o'clock in the morning or whatever it might be. We need to work out why you drink and whether we can prize you away from the need for that. Because if we can, then it doesn't automatically mean you must another touch job, but you've got to be very, very clear about what it's doing for you, and more importantly, what it's not.
And that's why we need slogans like one day at a time, because the thought of never, ever, ever, ever having a drink again for the rest of my life was just too much for me to bear. So like 11 years later, I'm still like, well, I'm not going to drink today. I can only deal with today, like right now. I don't know what's going to happen in the future. And if you would have told me however many years ago that I wouldn't have had a drink when my pop got sick and died, I would have never believed that I could do that without drinking. And then it happened. And so now, I feel better, but I could have never said I'm never going to have a drink again. I still won't say that. I will not ever say that because I don't know.
No.
All I know is that today I'm going to use my tools, and drinking is, not one of those tools anymore. But I never want to think that I, just am better or fixed or whatever, that, because I still want to escape. And sometimes I do it through work. Sometimes I do it through exercise. Sometimes I do it through reading or Netflix, or I have a lot of things I can do to numb out and check out and avoid. And, so I still, I'm aware of that. But it's not as destructive as before. And the awareness is like, oh, I'm doing it. I need to talk to somebody, or I need to go write about this or figure out what's going on with me. So I know we're up on time. I want to ask you just two more quick questions. One is, what do you do for fun? Like drinking, when I drank, that was fun. Like that, I would go drink with people, and that was what I did for fun. And then when I got sober, I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do to like actually blow off steam to have fun? So what do you do? I need to know.
It's going to sound really dull. For fun, I do pretty much what I used to do without the alcohol.
Okay.
I realized that lots of the things that I thought were fun because of the alcohol are just fun anyway.
Right.
So, I still love going out for dinner and meeting my friends, or going to the pub, or walking to the pub, or socializing. I still do all of that.
Yeah.
I just don't feel compelled to drink whilst I'm doing it. I don't believe it adds anything to it anymore. I feel like they're more sensorial, more vivid, more memorable experiences without me drinking. So I haven't changed into a completely different sociable person who does different things for fun. I do all the same things, but without drinking.
Yeah.
I love music. I love going to live concerts and stuff like that. I'm a bit of a concert person. And, oh my goodness, when I first went to a big concert and I didn't have five or six pints of lager while I was there, and, bottle of wine before I went, it was a revelation. To be able to wake up the next morning and still be buzzing from the evening instead of feeling incredibly shit from a hangover was a revelation. It was, so, and blowing off steam I think is slightly different. If that's a kind of like a pressure release thing, I just exercise a lot more than I used to. And I dally with things like meditation and yoga. I say dally because I'm learning. It's not the most natural thing for me, but I just like trying different things now. So that's it really.
I love that. It's so simple, and it's that curiosity again. Like, I don't know, I'm going to go try this and see if I like it, or I want to go try the things I did when I was drinking and see what it's like without it. And then you realize there's this elevated, awareness, and it's different, right? And I've gone back to places and things and events and reclaimed those memories. I had a bad memory because of alcohol, and I got to go recreate and reclaim that concert or that trip or that whatever, and do it sober and say, okay, that's not a bad memory for me anymore. That has been rewritten, and okay. Last question. Do you ever still have triggers that make you want to drink, or because a lot of people, after a while, they're like, no, I'm good. I'm good. I have all my other tools. And then other people say, yeah, I get triggered by XYZ. So like, do you, and if you do, what do you do in the moment? What's something an actionable thing that you can do in the moment to just get yourself out of that spot?
Oh, this is a good question. I do occasionally. Yeah, I do. I occasionally have triggers. For reasons that I won't go into here, I've always found my relationship with my dad a little bit triggering. Sometimes still, I have to sort of brace myself for his visits. They're not frequent visits, and they're certainly not every time that he comes, but very, very occasionally, the prospect of a visit triggers me. He's not well, so that can summon up a heap of different emotions. And bracing myself in the bad old days would have involved drinking.
Yeah.
But somebody once said to me, I think, or I read it somewhere, that those little triggers, those urges, if you like, are just echoes. And I love that description, little echoes. It helps me sort of notice them, but kind of recognize them as being something from the past, just bouncing around.
Yeah.
So how I deal with them, they've never got to the point where I've had me kind of reaching for a drink. I just go, oh my God, it's like they come out of nowhere.
Yeah. Yes.
They come out of nowhere. They kind of like, oh my God. And then I just have to sort of acknowledge them. And I go, oh, wow, there it is. And I consign them. I consign them to a former life. I don't do that anymore. I'm not that person anymore.
Right.
I also, which I think is quite interesting, I see them as a gift, a reminder that we should never be too complacent. And I actually think that helps probably make me a better coach as well, because, it doesn't happen very often at all. But when it happens, it reminds me that, this is, it's a funny old business, giving up the booze. And just when you think you've literally, put it into a kind of a cupboard over there that's never gonna come and sort of, speak to you again, something happens, and it does. But yeah, I mean, I always think of those things as well. Again, a little thing, those little urges and those little triggers, they're signals. They're not instructions. You just go, oh, hello, something's going on there. What's going on there then? It just gives you little options. What am I feeling? Why am I feeling it? Okay, that's interesting.
Which is probably why meditation is such a good tool, because that's all you're doing is observing, right? Like you're letting all your thoughts run around, you're observing them, and you don't need to do anything about it. You can just be curious about it. What does that mean? What is that thought? Where did that come from? Right? Like, but I love your honesty and how real you are about, because me too, occasionally I'll have a trigger, and it is like an echo. It's like a reflex. It's a reflex, but I'm aware of it. It's not. Used to, there was no buffer between the thought and the action. If I wanted a drink, I got a drink. That there was no, and now it's like, oh, wow. It kind of surprises me because it doesn't happen very often. And it's almost always tied to two things, family, or if I'm having fun. So if it's a gorgeous day and I'm in a really good mood and I'm doing something really fun, every now and then my mind will want to elevate that. A little extra. I want a little extra joy today or whatever. And it's really weird because I'm like, why isn't this enough? You feel so good. It's such a wonderful day. Why isn't this enough? And that usually shuts it down.
Well, exactly. You come to the conclusion that it is enough, It's enough. It's like, for goodness sake, it's great.
Yeah.
And I think I think it's important to be honest, because, just because you've kind of kicked the booze and, taken, clearly stepped away from having that in any way, shape or form as a response, it doesn't make you immune to the feelings.
Nope.
You don't suddenly become impervious to moments or emotions or occasions or events that are going to sort of make you feel uncomfortable. It's how you respond to them that's important. You wouldn't want to, we said a moment ago, once you've taken alcohol out, you're almost increasing the likelihood that these things are going to come along.
Yep.
But it's how you respond to them that's important. And you just, with a better toolbox or the ability to put in that pause and ask yourself the right questions, it's everything.
And for me too, having, whether you have a coach or meetings you go to or whatever it is that you do, I do share about those things. I will say I had the weirdest little craving last week, and I'll talk about it. And it lets me let other people know that no matter how long you're sober, this is still going to happen. It's not a big deal. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean you're not doing it right or whatever. And the other thing is it helps me not feel like I'm keeping a secret or something. I'm not going to make myself feel bad because I had that thought or that craving. I'm just going to let it be what it is. I didn't need to act on it. But again, like we were talking about earlier, when I share it with other people who have similar experiences, it just takes away the power. It doesn't turn into an obsession. It doesn't get on a loop, right? It was just a fleeting thought and it has been released and that's it. But it's also interesting and it's liberating to share. And when I first got into the rooms and I would hear people, women that I idolized, and I was like, oh my God, I want to be like her. I want her life. I want her recovery. And she would talk about how she's 15 years sober and she had a craving that day. I was like, oh, what? Like, what do you mean you had a craving? But it scared me because I was like, oh my God, I'm going to deal with this forever. And then the other part of me was like, that's awesome. Because it wasn't anything to freak out about.
No.
But I thought that AA, like you just had to be perfect and you weren't ever going to think about drinking again. I don't know where I got all of these ideas, but women around me were honest about what was really going on. And they weren't pretending. They weren't pretending that it's all rainbows and happy days in sobriety, because it's not.
Rainbows and unicorns. No.
Yeah. No. And that gave me comfort to know that, okay, yeah, there's still going to be hard days and there's other things I can do besides drink to deal with it, And
absolutely.
Well, absolutely. I feel like I could just talk to you forever. You're a ray of sunshine and so honest and real and intelligent. And I appreciate you so much.
Oh, well, thank you. That's very kind of you. And I've thoroughly enjoyed this. So it's been an absolute pleasure meeting you. So lots of mutual respect coming back at you. And I love your podcast. So thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Yes, thank you so much.